40 Watters, welcome to this week's NAMMageddon episode of the 40 Watt Podcast. This is the week where I tell you all about NAMM, and we're not going to talk about the gear. At least not mostly about the gear. Because I think there's a whole lot more we can talk about. Got some guests on, some first-time NAMM attendees. We're going to get impressions. We're going to talk about the vibe of NAMM. But before we get started, I need to talk about sponsors of this podcast. First of all, I want to talk about Barry at Grez Guitars. I got to hang out with Barry at the Woodwire Volts event in Anaheim during NAMM. It was a great time, and y'all need to go check out the new bass that he's building. It's not even on his website yet, so go to either the 40 Watt Podcast Instagram or go over to the Grez Guitars Instagram, and you can go check it out. It is like a Guild Starfire and like a Gibson semi-hollow EB bass. I don't know, we're in some weird nuclear reactor and they got teleported and fused together and became the most incredible thing I've ever seen. I want one very, 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 very badly, but I cannot justify it. So please, someone else go buy one and order one so I can live vicariously through you. It's a gorgeous instrument. Additionally, you should go over and check out Mark at Summer School Electronics, who also sponsors this podcast. Mark is making some really rad pedals at NAMM. He debuted I don't actually know if I'm supposed to talk about it, so I can't tell you. But if you go over to his Instagram, you can probably find out more about the stuff he's doing. But he is doing a giveaway. Currently, he is giving away what he is calling the yearbook. Y'all, I don't even know what it does. I know it's a giant pedal, but the coolest thing about it is he had a bunch of guitar personalities and players sign it. He's got a whole list of everyone that signed it over there on the Summer School Electronics Instagram, which is linked down below. You can check it out. And he's giving it away. I can't remember the date he's giving it away, but he is giving it away. And so please go check that out. And lastly, and maybe the biggest thank you of this episode, I need to thank Sweetwater for sponsoring our NAMM house this year. Sweetwater took care of us, made sure that we had a place to stay for NAMM. We crammed 11 people into an Airbnb and had the best time. And we were able to sponsor a NAMM house taco party for us and a lot of our friends. So thank you, Sweetwater, for making that happen. In celebration of NAMM house, we're giving away a guitar. Well, Sweetwater's giving away a guitar, and we just get to tell you to go do it. The link is down below. It's going to be given away on February 3rd. It is a classic vibe Jaguar in an exclusive finish. It's white, y'all. It's exclusive to Sweetwater, but it's white. It looks rad. I've never had a Jaguar. I maybe need to buy one. I've never even owned one. Not sure I've even played one. So maybe I need to fix that, but you can win one down below. Click the link. Thank you, Sweetwater, for making this happen. In fact, I think that's my new slogan for Sweetwater. Sweetwater makes it happen. I'm not even going to ask their marketing department. I'm just going to start using that. All right, that's it. Sorry for the very, very long intro. This week, I have Matt and Dave from the Guitar Dads podcast hanging out. We're going to talk about NAMM. What's up, guys?
What's up, man? Thanks for having us on.
Yeah,
here.
Thanks for jumping on kind of last minute.
Yeah.
I was going to record this at a later date, but then I realized I needed to be out of town. And I needed to get it out because I wanted to talk about it. So things happen.
You were always traveling.
Man, it's because I do too many things between work and other roles I do that are tangential to work, and then also guitar stuff. I feel like I only get to sleep in my own bed about half the year. That's not true, but it is what it is. It's how I know I would not make it as a touring musician. Because I hate it. I want to be at home. I've become a total homebody.
Yeah, I know the feeling, man.
Yeah. So this year, this was y'all's first NAMM. This is my second big NAMM, like I did the last summer NAMM.
Yeah, you did. Yeah, the Nashville NAMM.
Yeah, the Nashville NAMM, and it was a sad affair.
Yeah,
it was a very sad affair. This is my second one, and obviously this one was even bigger than last year. So I got to experience a bunch of things for the first time as well, but y'all got to see the entire circus for the first time. First question, first thing to cover. Were you prepared? Do you feel like you were prepared for just how crazy it was?
And no, it was, I mean, Matt and I kept in a way, pinching ourselves because it was one turn after the next where we were just blown away by everything we were seeing. And it really, for anybody that's been, but for those that have this vision in their head of what it should be or what you've seen in videos, It is so much more, and you can't be prepared for it until you actually experience it.
Yeah. No, I would agree. I think it was just kind of what I expected, but then like 1,000 times more on top of that. That's the best way I can describe it.
Yeah, I think, and it's some of that I'm about to say. It's some of this. I think everyone thinks it's just playing a bunch of gear and talking to a bunch of famous people all the time, or maybe you're not famous, because let's be honest, some of these folks are only famous in this tiny niche of the guitar industry or the drum industry or whatever your field is. Like drummers and synth players and other personalities that I'm sure have huge followings that I had no idea who they were because I don't follow that world.
That's right.
But I felt like it'd be a really fun conversation to talk about like why NAMM exists. Like, what is the real point? And for those folks who are like, man, I wish I could go to NAMM. No, you don't. You actually really don't, because I think it's a really fun experience. It's really awesome to go, but it is also a lot of work. It is.
Yeah.
It's taxing. It's emotionally, mentally, physically taxing.
Yeah.
It is especially if you're a content creator. And you know, you guys are with me in this. We didn't create a lot of content at NAMM.
No, not at NAMM itself. No.
Yeah. So I feel like if you're going there to make connections for work or for your hobby, which I do this as my side gig, as a side hobby, as y'all do.
Yes, we do.
It's sort of work if you look at it that way. But I don't think it's not for the casual guitarist who just wants to meet their hero.
No.
No, not at all.
Yeah, I think if that's what you think NAMM is, you're much better off buying a ticket to a show and trying to meet your hero at their concert.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's right.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Dave.
That's pretty accurate, because NAMM is so many things, but what it is not is just like, a people watching event. It's not to go like just check people out, check gear out. It's to check gear out, to meet people, to see people you haven't seen for a long time or whatever. But in my mind, it's really just like this. We always talk about in the guitar world, it's one big community. We're all here to help each other out. There's not a lot of like drama and enemies and things like that. I mean, there's that, but not a lot.
Yeah.
But this is
It's
one
very
way
rare.
to kind of, this embodies that idea of community 1,000-fold.
Well, there's a couple of sides to this, right? One is if you're a heavy duty gearhead like we all are, right? To be able to go and have hands on all this amazing gear that, just isn't available in stores, or, it's kind of like being in like the greatest guitar store in the world, right? So in that sense, like it's pretty cool. But is it worth like everything you go through to get there and do that? Like you can in here and we'll just be honest here. You can't really get a sense of what things sound like at NAMM, right? You just, like, especially when there's amps on the floor in a booth, you can't turn them up because there's the noise police. Even if you could, there's so much other noise going on. It's hard to get a real sense of anything on the floor. What you can get a sense for is you pick up a guitar, you see how it feels and plays. So for guitars, I think it can be great. But even then, like, the way I feel is I don't really get a sense for gear until it's like kind of at my home and I'm really putting it through its paces. So like it's even not all it's cracked up to be just for like a gearhead, right? So
yeah,
like Dave said, I think it really is about the networking aspect of it. And, for us, it was really worth it because we've been in this community for a few years now, 4 years now. We've met a lot of people online through doing this. So, being able to have those connections and meet people in person that we've had on the pod or we've just talked to and have all those connections and networking is the most important part of it. I think you'll hear everybody say that. I mean, the gear part is incredibly cool because that's why we're there.
Yeah, exactly.
But in the end, that's the whole thing is it's a trade show in the end.
Yeah, I think one of I was going to say the same thing. I was talking to a builder today. I was texting him and like, he asked me, hey, did you try this amp that they had at the show? And I was like, no. He said, well, I was pretty sure you sat down at the booth and played something. I said, I did, but I'll be honest, the booth across from you was so loud, there was no chance I was going to hear anything. So I couldn't really try it. I said, I'm going to have to wait until Fretboard Summit. They're going to be at Fretboard Summit and I'm going to check it out then when I can actually hear it. But yeah, guitars, sure. I picked up a few guitars just to see what they felt like and see what they played like. I tried to demo the Novo bass at the Novo booth, and they had this little Ampeg practice bass amp. I was like,
Yeah.
can I borrow this and just take it over to the
Yeah.
dark glass booth where they've got a big bass amp where I can actually hear something going on? Because there was no hearing it. It felt great. I
Yeah.
sure would love to know what it actually sounds like.
Yeah. That was it. And some of the booths get really fancy and they have like a booth that you can go inside of and it's
Yeah.
not soundproof, but Fender, well, Third Man had that for the Panoverb,
Mm-hmm.
and Marshall had that for their new amp. So like I felt like that was the only time we got any sense of any new amps where we were in one of those booths and playing
If you
it,
could even
right?
get in.
But then that,
Yeah.
it's so crowded, you can't get in. So like even that's not an ideal situation. So yeah.
Yeah, I feel like the real importance is, and it's back to this. As we saw the boom of 20 and 21 and into early 22, and now it's fading. Even a lot of the companies that went direct only, they cut all their dealers. They're like, hey, we can do this on our own. A lot of them are returning to the fold of going to dealers because they're realizing, oh, direct is great, but we're not getting seen as much if we're just going direct. I was talking to a builder the other day and they told me that they had stepped away from their booth for a minute and they were near somebody else's booth and Guitar World magazine walked up, right? And started to try to ask them questions about the company's booth that they were near. And they were like, oh, I don't work here. Sorry, I do something different. And then they were like, oh, but here's an opportunity. So they got to talking to them and they were like, oh, so who are you with? And took them over to their booth, which was right next to them, and like showed them what their things they're doing. This is a small builder. And started showing them the stuff. They were like, this is really awesome. Started exchanging information. They started connecting. And it's like, this is why you go. This is why you're there in person with your product. Right. Because I was actually in an episode that I think is going to go out the same day this episode goes out. I was talking with Joe Branton on the Guitar Nerds about the point of NAMM. And it's kind of like going to the supermarket, right? And let's say, because a lot of us are buying groceries online. We order online, have them delivered, or do pickup at the store, right? And so we buy the things we know we want. But I use the analogy, if I'm going to buy salsa, right? I'm just going to buy the salsa I know, but there's an awful lot of other salsas out there that I might really want to try. I'm never going to know they exist if I don't go to the store and look at the shelf and see what they have. And we see that as players. Retailers have the same problem. They need to go see what is out there so they know what they should stock in their stores.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And the other thing too, like there may not be something that you were totally interested in trying, but then you maybe talk to the builder and you realize their passion and what they're doing and why they're doing it. And that starts to attract you to the product even more. And then it becomes this personal connection with the gear, And so there's that. You don't get that by dragging a mouse along Sweetwater, Guitar Center, all these other places you can buy are the great gear we buy. But if you can be in person with the person with the builder, the creator, whoever, it just that extra personal touch really adds something.
Well, there's a reason why, post-pandemic travel for business didn't just end completely. Yes, I think maybe companies aren't spending as much on travel as they did, but there's still such critical importance to meeting people and having these, connections and building, the relationships with people. NAMM is a lot about that. There's a lot of events that happen after NAMM. I know there's all kinds of private, dinners and all this stuff that's happening like that. It's just as much about that as it is the trade show itself as well. And that was true for us as well. Like we talked about, we had a taco party, we did a few other events and stuff. So that stuff is super important in this industry, right? In any industry, but in this industry, it's important as well. So
yeah, I think that's so huge, and that's a thing that gets lost on the casual guitarist. That's like, I want to go to NAMM so I can check out all this gear. I think y'all played way more gear than I played the entire time because I barely played anything.
We were like kids in the candy store, being the first time, and it's tough. I'm going to steer clear of the analogy, but it was a good time.
It was definitely that. We needed to have hands on as much as we could, but it also gets like taxing, like just trying out a million things. Like what got taxing to me was all the pedal stations with the headphones.
Yeah.
Like it's fun for like a first few ones you go through, and then it's like, am I really getting a sense for this thing? It's like you're playing it through like a Strymon Iridium or God knows what kind of modeler. You don't really know how they have it set. You know what I mean? Like that's a tough way to demo pedals, but you know, it's better than not being able to hear anything and not getting any sense of clue of what's going on. But you do that for a few times and it all kind of starts to blend into each other, and it's hard. So
Yeah.
it isn't really all it's cracked up to be as like a place to go and demo gear. You know, like I'm someone that for 10 years has been watching Andertons, and it gave me a new respect for Andertons, how they can get the audio quality that they get in these NAMM videos, and you can actually get any semblance of what these gears sounds like. They're doing a really good job at it, right? Like they're probably some of the best at it. I know there's a bunch of other people doing it.
I feel like Pete and Lee are underappreciated for the work they put in. I'm not a big Anderson's TV watcher. I don't watch a lot of their content. I don't watch a lot of demos and YouTube demos anyway, because I'm all about stories. I want to hear about music and musicians, and I want to hear the stories of the people making stuff. I'm way more interested in that than the gear itself sometimes.
Totally.
But I noticed that the first year when I went last year, and watching those two work the floor to get the content they get, to not only get it, but to get it and have it uploaded while they're there. Another one that needs to be a major shout out for how good they are at their NAMM coverage is Andy Ferris.
Oh yeah,
Guitar Geek.
He's doing some amazing stuff. His rig was ridiculous.
It was absolutely top-notch professional.
Yeah, he had a cart with his cameras, laptops, just everything. He was doing it all.
So last year when he had that same rig or similar rig last year, and I think it was after the first day, we were all going to like go out and grab a drink and some pizza or something like that, right? And so I messaged Andy. I'm like, hey, we're going out. You want to come hang out? He's like, I can't. I have to edit video. So he goes back to his room, edits all the video from that day, and gets it out.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, that's hardcore.
That's what he was doing. I think he works with the editor now. And we ran into him outside. I just said hi to him, and he was like, hey guys. And then like, I could tell he was just super busy. And then like, we kind of hung out, and he's like, oh no, let just give me a second and then we'll talk. And he was just like feverishly uploading stuff. So, you know, either he was editing it or he was sending it to another person, like just getting it so it was out the door, right? It's unbelievable work that he was putting in. And every time I saw him a few times, he was hitting it hard. So you got to shout out to those guys that are putting in content creation at NAMM. Crazy. Is unbelievable.
Yeah, I want to tag along on that, because we talk about all the gear and the builders and everything else, but the content creators that are just working so hard the entire show. If there's been plenty of comments all over the internet about how easy this thing seems to be for a lot of us that do it, and we can get it because, you know, we were there too at one point. But then when you start getting into this world, you realize how difficult, how much of a challenge it really is. And these guys are just they are out there killing it. Yeah. And it's so much work.
It really is. And if it was that easy, everybody would be doing it, is the way I look at it.
Yeah.
This year I tried to get content at NAMM. I still need to edit some stuff down. I just haven't had time since we've been back, because working a full-time job when you've been gone for a whole week, you're just playing catch up when you get back, right? So I'm hoping to get some of that stuff rolling out next week. And the challenge of getting that much content, keeping track of what you've recorded so that you can edit it later, because often you're recording video and audio separately, so you've got to keep those files together. It's a big exercise in data management.
Oh yeah.
And then also you got to edit it. You got to get it out there. And it's not like the Wi-Fi at the convention center is doing you any favors.
Oh yeah.
No,
definitely
not at all.
No. And it was better this year. Like when you were connected, the Wi-Fi was better, but I was being disconnected constantly. Just constantly having to relog in.
I don't know that I even bothered with it after I got disconnected a couple times. I'm like, yeah. So
it's bonkers. And then the other thing is that it's not just NAMM. There's all of the periphery that happens
let's
around
talk about
it.
That.
Yeah. So not only and I mentioned it earlier because I hung out with Barry at it.
Yes.
You had the Woodwire Volts event that we all went to.
Yep.
And I ended up working there longer than intended because I got roped in by Brian at Bees Music. It's like, hey, you want to go through and talk to all these vendors with me? I was like, sure, let's go. Let's do it.
Yeah, he's great, by the way.
Yeah, he's
I was
awesome.
doing a bad job of getting content there anyway.
Yeah, yeah. That's good. You're trying to get content, Philip. We see you in action. You're trying to get your content, but you're just talking to people.
Yeah.
And then you're just
well, that's the thing.
You're not remembering to maybe turn on the camera or something. Yeah.
I know, it's so hard.
Yeah, yeah.
And also it's like coming at what is good content out of, like, this is a real question. What is good content out of NAMM?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
what
it's
do
a good
people
question.
actually want? You're not getting a good, accurate idea of what the gear is. Joe and Matt talked about it last week on the Guitar Nerds podcast.
Yeah.
About the new not electro harmonics, the new Digitech, the
Yes.
hammer-on pedal, the hammer.
hammer-on. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's cool.
and Matt was like, "Yeah, there's some demos out there, but they're all terrible because they were folks trying to get it at NAMM, and therefore they had a grand total of like 30 seconds with it before they hit record, so they don't know how it works yet.
Yeah,
they're trying to demo it.
That's another piece of it. Like I said, getting it back into your home and your studio and spending some time with it. That's when you can actually demo stuff.
Yeah.
So it's just like you're getting first impression. To answer my attempt to answer the question, I think it's cool to see the new stuff like in the flesh, right? Like this isn't just like, a picture that the company has put out. It's out there in the real world. You can put hands on it. Like, to me, that's kind of cool. Like, I appreciate what, like we mentioned, Andy and Andertons, and, I like the little interviews with the builders. And, they kind of give you an overview of what's going on. You don't always hear kind of directly from a builder, right? So I think that's good content. I would say that that's probably better than actually like listening to something at NAMM. Like, let's see what the builder or the rep or the marketing people want to say about this. I'm like, and hopefully you get someone that's a little closer, that's not really just like someone that's just working the booth and doesn't really know what's going on. Like, we see you, Marshall.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point, Matt. And the one thing that I realized very quickly was, and going into it as a rookie is like, all right, how are we going to capture some of this stuff for our listeners and for the Facebook group and all that stuff? And I very quickly realized unless I had a plan before I went in, it wasn't going to happen. I brought a laptop with me, never touched it. I took a kind of a tour around the floor the first day, and I filmed maybe like 3 or 4 minutes, and I just used a cheap little app on my phone, and I try to break it down, and I posted that to, some stuff to Instagram and some stuff to Facebook. And I realized unless I'm actually going to have time, which we didn't, to sit down and edit this stuff properly, maybe just showing people that haven't been here what it kind of looks like, what the flow is and all that stuff, that might be useful. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's the hardest thing. I think last year my most viewed or most successful, quote unquote, whatever you want to call successful, my most successful piece of NAMM content was literally me just holding up my phone and saying, "This is what NAMM sounds like," and then letting my phone just record the cacophony around me.
It is so true.
And that's without going to the drum section.
I was just going to bring that up, Philip, because the guitar section is bad. And I got to say, the biggest culprits in the guitar section are the bassists.
Yes, they really are.
And I don't really blame them. I think it's a frequency thing, right? But
yeah,
it's definitely a frequency thing, because to actually hear anything, they have to turn it up. And that's just, it's a frequency thing. Just leave it at that. So they're the biggest culprits in the guitar area. But yeah, you go into the drums section. The way I can describe it for the listeners that may not know, it's like, I don't know, like 100 marching bands like walking down a hallway. You can't believe it. It's like, it's relentless too. Like, there was like this bar, how they had those like little bars everywhere on the show floor. At one point we went to like the drum section because we were like, oh, there's not a line at this bar. We knew why. And we didn't do a lot of drinking, but like towards the end of the day, we're like, I need a beer, man. Like, this is, I'm done. So we
that same bar.
Yeah, right. And you're just like,
regretted it instantly.
Yeah. You wait for like a minute for the beer and you're like, I gotta get out of here.
So I'm really curious to hear back. I need to fill out my feedback form for the NAMM organization about the show, but I'm really interested for the feedback, because I know that in the drum room, or at least John from NAMM said they were going to. I didn't spend enough time in the drum room to know if they did, so I'm assuming they did. They limited like the time you could make noise, and they did volume resets is what they were calling them. And so At 45 minutes after the hour, no more playing.
Oh, interesting.
And then for 15 minutes, you could talk and like actually have conversations. And the idea was that you keep that whole climbing volume that's happening.
Yeah.
Because you're just being louder to be heard over the thing that's louder, and then somebody's trying to be louder to be heard over you, and so on and so forth. They were resetting it. I was only in that space when I went to that bar, and it did not feel like there was anything bringing that volume back. So I'm really curious what it might have been like without those resets.
Yeah, no, I think you're right.
Must have been
It's
10 times
probably
worse.
been terrible. You know, one thing, the Yamaha kind of area, I wouldn't call it a booth. It was just like a giant room that they were in. That was probably the worst because you had guitar. Well, the guitar the guitar they had up oh no, they didn't have it headphones set up. So maybe
No.
they did. No, they had the they had the battery powered, like the little Yamaha practice amps. What are those called, Philip? You know what I'm talking about.
The
TH.
Yeah, the little white that look like a stereo.
Yeah, they're like a little Bluetooth speaker or something. Anyway,
Yeah.
They had those for a guitar, so the guitar wasn't really the culprit. But you had drums in there, which was insane. You had keyboards, which were mainly headphones as well. But then you had
Boat
the
motors,
brass.
motorcycles. I mean, everything.
Hey, yeah. You had boat motors going. Then you had the brass. So you hear like trumpets and all this stuff, and then you hear in drums again, like that was like a marching band. I was like, this is insane.
No,
So,
that was like
anyway.
a marching band rehearsal.
Yeah,
with a bunch of like middle schoolers. That's what
at
that
one
room
point,
sounded
but
like.
it was really cool because, like, you know, with guitar, we know, like, you hear like the same kind of, like, you know, like you go to Guitar Center, you hear the same kind of riffs. It was kind of cool to hear the trumpet guys, because I heard at one point I heard the Olympic theme, that I was like, that's awesome. Like, I kind of enjoyed it.
Yeah, they have their own licks that they play incessantly.
Trumpeters have their own licks, it turns out. Anyway,
so I didn't get to the Yamaha room this year at all. Last year I spent some time there. This year I didn't get up there. I meant to. I went to. Did y'all make it to the Boss roll-in room? Did y'all get in there?
Well,
we did, but there was a show going on at the same time.
There was a
so
full-fledged concert going on in there.
Yes.
Why would they do that?
So listeners, Boss had, I think that room must have been like 20 by 20, 20 by 15, something like that.
It was not large. No,
it was not. It was not large. Like, I know that sounds like a big room, y'all.
Yeah.
But I was told by some folks at Boss, this is the first time they've ever done a show with all of their brands in the same booth, like in the same room. And here's the problem with that. First of all, they had bands performing on a stage in the room with the gear, like loud bands. Don't get me wrong. The couple of bands I heard while I was up there sounded great.
They sounded good.
It was super loud. But then additionally, you've got the keyboards, you've got the pedals, you've got the guitar stuff, which can all be done in headphones.
Yeah. Yeah.
In the same room with DW drums.
Yeah. Why would they do that?
And I heard someone say, and I will not call them on the carpet who it was, but one of the Boss folks looked at me when the drums started going after the band had finished, right? The band is done. We're like, oh, a break. And then someone starts banging on drums. And they said, oh, yeah, this is why Roland has spent the last 40 years trying to perfect the electric drums.
Yeah, that's why. Yeah,
That's
it
so
makes a lot of
true.
sense.
Yeah.
That's hilarious. No, it was odd how they did it that way. Like, they had all these like stations, headphone stations for pedals, for keyboards and different things, but then they had like these very loud bands in those same rooms.
Mm-hmm.
It's just
Same
the way that they
space.
did
Didn't
it.
make
I
sense.
mean, look, but yeah, like, and we're talking about like club, like you go into a club and you hear a band. That's how loud it was.
Yeah. It didn't feel like they were peeling back for it.
No, not at all.
Anyway, yeah, it was fun.
But I think all of this is to say that there's a purpose for NAMM, and some of the coverage makes it look like all fun and games, and there is a lot of fun and games. Don't get me wrong, but it's loud and it's busy. It is an introvert's absolute nightmare. It's not a place just to go and think you're hanging out and having a good time. It is absolute work.
No.
The hangouts happen after the show. That's when all of that happens, and even then, some of that's work.
No, it is. Yeah.
So we started to talk about Woodwire Volts. Y'all spent some time there. It was a little different over there because it was a smaller space. Although even there were some times where it got a little loud, a little raucous, especially even though Satellite Amps was in its own room. There occasionally it got really turned up, and
Insanely loud.
I looked around and I was like, okay, that's a lot.
And
Sounded
that was
good.
partially our fault when we were in there because we had turned it down, and then the dude walks in and we thought we were going to get called out, and here come the sound police, and he just said, "No, man, turn it up."
He goes,
Okay.
"We're in
Love
this
that.
room." He comes in, he goes, "We're in this room because we got to play these amps loud." And so he's like, he cranked it up. He put it at
Yeah.
It
like
dimed it.
3 o'clock.
Yeah. I mean, there's a part of me that loves it, as the amp lover in me loves it, but it's
Yes.
sort of like it makes it a little difficult to really, at least in that scenario, you could actually go see what an amp or a guitar sounded like.
Well, yeah.
Yeah,
You
you
could-
did.
Poor
You could.
Poor
You
Barry,
could.
though. Poor Barry for being right outside that room.
Barry was right next to the Satellite
He
amp
was.
room.
He was. He was a good sport about it.
He really was.
Yeah.
Actually, I was talking to him when it wasn't y'all, it was somebody else was in there cranking it up. And like every time they'd go to hit something, he and I would just look at each other and we're like, we're waiting. We'll find the window to talk, I promise.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
you're
You're just
talking
waiting it
between
out.
the licks.
It was yeah, exactly. It was crazy. Yeah, but that Woodwire and Volts was awesome. A lot of great people there. Another great hang.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
And
where
then,
some of the best conversations happened, simply because it was quieter, it was smaller, and you felt like you could spend more time. You didn't feel like you were taking up somebody's time. You felt like you were there just having a genuine conversation with them. And not really even networking with them, just talking guitars.
And that was something that was kind of open to the public, right? Am I right about that?
oh yeah, anyone could go. There was an
Yeah.
entrance fee.
Yeah, you had to
but
pay. Yeah.
Anybody could go. Did y'all ever make it out on that patio area where they had the stage?
We did. Yeah, that was cool.
Yeah, they alternated between musicians playing and builders talking about the thing they make.
Oh, we heard a couple of guys playing out there, which was awesome. Another place where you could really hear the gear well.
Exactly.
So cool.
I like that because I caught Zach from Mythos's demonstration of most of his pedal line out there, and I thought that was a really neat addition. I love that idea. I sort of hope that continues. I hope that's a thing that's back next year.
I loved it. Yeah.
I may end up spending 2 days there instead of just one.
Yeah, that's your jam. I can see it.
That's
the main reason we went out there is because there was a nice espresso bar out there.
There was
that I tracked down, and the espresso was really good. And just so you know,
it was. I had some out there
Did
as
you
well.
have some? Yeah, it was quite.
Can't stray far from your coffee.
It was one of my very few coffees of the entire weekend. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. You were drinking tea. We were drinking instant coffee because that's all we had in the house.
You didn't like the not sponsored by Sweetwater instant coffee that we had in the Airbnb?
I did have a couple of cups of the instant coffee, and I kind of died a little inside both times.
Yeah,
me too.
That wasn't the only thing that was instant after that.
It was a pinch.
Yeah, you do what you got to. I was drinking tea because I know that my voice gets shredded in those environments. And actually, Matt, we talked about that before we even went. You were like, "Can you just not yell?" Having been there,
having been there, that's not enough. Although I will say, like you can kind of get away with it on the NAMM floor. It's the combination of the NAMM floor all day, and then you go out and just are in loud environments at these parties afterwards. And the combination of the two, no one can sustain a voice.
Yeah. No one's designed to talk that loudly for 5 days.
You can't do it.
Yeah. And so additionally, there wasn't just the Woodwire Volts. There was the Effector Market on Saturday that put on by Chase Bliss at the I always forget the name of that place. I really should remember.
Yeah, what was that?
I could look at my invoice, look at my bills, my credit card statement. But yeah, that's such a cool event, but I wonder how much longer they'll be able to sustain it there, because the last 2 years it gets so packed on that patio, like you can't get through there.
Yeah.
No, we missed out because of that.
I can see that.
And we wanted to check out some other booths, some other builders, and we just didn't get the chance because we would wait. I think it was at Chase Bliss actually the first time because we got there somewhat early, and we had our chance to hang out with Maris and over at Empress. But by the time we got over to Chase Bliss, it was just mobbed, and we didn't want to really wait too long because there's so many people packed into that small area.
We had so much to see. We had to get back to NAMM. But that was cool though. That was a fun hang as well. But you're right, it did get a little crowded on that patio.
It got a little crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, there were some builders I didn't even get a chance to talk to. I didn't get to talk to the Empress folks, and I didn't get to talk to, who else didn't I talk to? There was somebody else. I got to most of them though. I was able to get to most of them.
All right.
Yeah, and actually that's even I spent a lot of time playing the Beatronic stuff. But that's for another.
All right, maybe you can explain it to Dave.
Yeah, maybe we'll talk about that maybe on the Patreon episode. How about that?
That's right.
And then lastly, we stuck around for an extra day on Sunday, and we all went down to the Amigo Guitar Show. I'm going to be really honest. This is. I got way more excited about the Amigo Guitar Show than I did about NAMM itself.
That's the Amigo Guitar Show was your place.
Yeah,
I'm not surprised to hear you say that, because it's all like vintage stuff. It's unique stuff. Like, it's
I love
more,
the quirky.
Yeah, the quirky stuff. It's much more up your alley than like, okay, well, Fender put out a standard.
Vintage, I'm still heartbroken because I hear vintage and then I see 1990 something, thinking
you're just gonna have to get over that one, Dave.
Yeah,
it's not all. It's not all. There was a lot of cool stuff though at that show.
Really hurt.
So for me, it was like I got to play a bunch of stuff that I was really excited about. But the thing is, like vintage Gibson, some vintage Fender stuff. There were some Two Rock prototypes there that Bill Kennard had built, and like that's a thing.
Yes, that was cool.
You're sort of in Bill's backyard there in the Southern California area. But I got as excited when I wandered into the back room that somebody was like, "Oh, this is just the dude who has a bunch of junk," and he had like vintage Ks and harmonies and silver tones, and I was like, "No, this isn't junk. This is awesome."
There was a lot of awesome stuff, and you kind of had to look around, and it was kind of an unbelievable thing because you would walk from one table to the next, and there was just like an unbelievable piece on like every table. It was it's kind of amazing. So, yeah.
Yeah, you got to imagine if you had a lot more time to walk around there and just take your time, they're the treasures that are probably buried there that you didn't even notice,
Yeah.
So that was a pretty
We saw a lot
show.
Though, Dave. We saw a lot of the treasures.
Yeah. We did. We talked to one of them.
Yeah,
we
did. That's right.
We did. That listeners, they are referencing. We got to meet Scott Holiday from Rival Sons,
which was awesome
at the guitar show, and got to nerd out with him about Cower guitars for a little bit, and just had a great chat there.
It was awesome.
Once again, it's all about the hang, and I think that's ultimately the takeaway here. If I needed to wrap this all up in a bow to sort of explain to the listener the NAMM experience and the point why NAMM exists.
Yeah.
NAMM exists so that the community that exists around this gear can continue to find and support each other, and to create an environment where all of this wonderful stuff and these wonderful people are getting out to the people who can't and honestly shouldn't go to NAMM.
Yeah.
That's not their environment, but they want to make sure that you're going to get a chance to see these smaller brands. It's sort of like Fender and Gibson, and they had booths, but it was invite only into them, and like I don't think that's a big deal for them. Like, people already know who Fender and Gibson are.
That's right.
They don't need to be at NAMM. What you need are the folks, and I said this a couple of years ago on a live stream with Steve. People like Summer School Electronics. People like Big Sonic, which is weird because that's a company people should know about.
Big Sonic's awesome. That Ottawa, oh my goodness.
Yeah, super rad.
That Ottawa was incredible.
I do like Ottawa. It's a great city. I have the Guitar Dads on. I got to tell at least one dad joke, right?
One dad joke a show.
One dad
Ottawa.
joke. So
shout out to Landon.
Shout out Landon. I'm gonna get Landon on an episode this season, and it is gonna be the driest humor episode in the history. But that's the point. Dealers finding brands, finding dealers, and content creators being there to make sure you hear about as much as possible. And I think that's why you've got to have literally hundreds of content creators there.
You do.
Because there is no way for any handful to cover everything.
Yeah, no. I think that's right. It's a really good point you make, Philip. I think it's very well put. Going in, I think we had this conversation over text. Going in, I was like, I wasn't really expecting that I was going to spend a lot of time with the smaller builders. I was thinking it's NAMM. It's all about the big companies. It's about your Yamaha, because they have, even though Fender and Gibson were doing their own kind of, private thing, not having large booths anymore. Plenty of companies that we discussed did have their large booths. But what Dave and I were much more attracted to, and actually, if you listen to our episode that launched this week, we really spent a lot of time on the smaller builders, the pedals and the amps and the guitars. We spent a lot of time on like the boutique kind of guitar world, because that's the stuff that people need to hear about, because there's just amazing stuff happening, being made by amazing people that the world needs to hear about. And so, yeah, I just couldn't agree more with.
Yeah, it's really an amazing. I mean, all that stuff you said, Philip, but it really is like, certainly with all the craziness that's gone on in the last like 5 years of COVID and coming out of that, and all the the nutty things going on in the world at all times. It's like this is the one place where everybody had a smile on their face. Everybody had some kind of commonality. We were all there to just have fun and network and talk and just enjoy being there and being with each other. And it was such a release. I think that's
Mhm.
just one of the most incredible things you can really find
It's a
in
good
a
point. The
community.
vibes are so good and high
Yeah.
in this community of people. Like I've been to, work shows, things that I do for my professional career. It's not, this isn't the vibes.
No.
Yeah.
People are
But
there because
this,
they have to be, and it's not
exactly,
fun.
exactly. But NAMM, and you could tell, like, there's definitely, like, you go over to the pro audio section of NAMM, like, there's guys, every guy's wearing a suit jacket. Like that vibe was more like trade show vibe. But you go to like the guitar area, the drum area, like pretty much any instrument related area, and
It's
it's
all
like,
t-shirts, blue jeans.
yeah,
That's right. Yeah.
like Dave and I were joking when we were in the pro audio area, because we are like, oh, we feel underdressed here. Like, what's going on? And so, but like the vibes are just so great, and I think it's for that reason. It's it is a great group of people. They do come together to see each other as well and make new connections. So
Yeah. Well, I think that's the big takeaway is that, and so if you were feeling, listeners, if you were feeling FOMO about not getting to go to NAMM, understand that it's a great vibe, it's a great energy, but it is work, and it is hard, and it is expensive just because it's Anaheim and Disney and tourism, and just that's just what it is. But there's a point for this show. And if you didn't get to go to NAMM, or it's not a thing that you could even go to, because like if you're a member of the general public, you got to pay to join NAMM in order to go to NAMM. If you're not a content creator or a brand, there are a ton of great guitar shows that travel around the country. The Amigo Guitar Show is one. There's the Dallas Guitar Festival that happens in Dallas every May. There's Fretboard Summit in Chicago, which I think there are still tickets available for.
oh, are there?
You should go to if you don't. I know in the Northeast, pedal shows are a big, big deal. In the Northeast
They
and the
are.
Pacific
Yeah.
Northwest, there's lots of pedal shows you could go to. There are great opportunities to get that kind of experience without, I'm trying not to say without sort of stepping in the way of brands and dealers trying to make those connections that are going to
That's
help
right.
get them in places where you will find them more often.
That's right. That's right.
So
Yeah.
I don't want to say, listeners, that any of you would be getting in the way, but it's, just
But that's,
hanging
yeah.
out isn't the point.
That's not the point. The point is to make the connections. Even Dave and I kind of felt like that. It's like we didn't want to step in the way of dealers. When we be talking to these small builders, we didn't want to take a ton of their time, because it's like the person that could walk into the booth after us could be a dealer. Right? And
Exactly.
It's like, and so it's like we get in and we get out, right? And so you're right. Like that's not the vibe. The vibe isn't like, oh, this is open to the public, and because it isn't open to the public, and there's a real distinct purpose. These exhibitors, especially the smaller guys, it's a ton of money that they got to put up, right? Like Fellows Guitars, we will just shout them out. Great.
Oh yeah,
small,
Jonathan's great, dude.
Yeah, Jonathan Fellow, great
fantastic
guy. He drove out all of his guitars, right? Because it's like, what are you going to do? Ship them out? I think he's from Missouri, right? So like Missouri to Anaheim, it's not a short drive, right? So, and God knows what it costs to, exhibit and all this stuff. We could go down that path. We're not going to tell you. It's a ton of money, right? So these guys are heavily invested in this, and it needs to be worth their while. It's not, like just anybody can go and see what's going on. So yeah, I think that's a great point.
Yeah. So I think we're going to go over to Patreon, and we are going to talk about gear on Patreon, because
Ooh,
we're going to talk about some of our favorite things from NAMM. So listeners, if you are not a Patreon supporter of the podcast, you can go over to patreon.com/40watt podcast. That is 40 WATTPODCAST. We're going to see if my spelling was good there. You can click the link down below too. And you can, for $5 a month, you get extra episodes every week that an episode goes out. Additionally, while you're down there looking for that link, there's the links for the giveaway. I'm going to try to remember, sorry, Mark, if I forget, to put a link for the yearbook giveaway. And if you are listening to this episode in the future and these giveaways are over, those links are still there, and I'm sorry they don't work. I can't do anything for you if you didn't get into it when they were live, because I'm
Nothing you
not
can
going to
do.
go back and take them down.
that's right.
I'm just not.
That's a great point.
So, listeners, Matt and Dave, thanks for coming on and chatting NAMM with us.
Thanks, man.
Thanks for having
us.
So all of the links for Matt and Dave's Guitar Dad podcast are also below. Click those while you're there as well. At least all the ones I can find, and maybe some of the ones they didn't want me to find. So click those. Until next time, be good to yourselves, be kind to each other, and make some noise.